Hello and welcome to Wrestling Trope Alert, the channel where we analyze professional wrestling. If this is your first time here, help the channel by clicking the subscribe button. Today we are going to talk about Eric Bischoff's wild journey to the WWE. Eric Aaron Bischoff was born in Detroit in the 50s into the tough environment of the Motor City. Brawls and fights were common through his early years, and the young Eric grew accustomed to fighting with the other kids in the tough urban environment. Then sometime later, the Bischoffs moved and settled in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Eric in his formative years began to take interest in martial arts. Eric participated in tournaments around the country, getting disqualified often because he was an unruly fighter. Eric was a tough young man with a temper that fortunately found a way to control his more violent outbursts through martial arts. Eric Bischoff was a third-degree black belt, practiced kickboxing, and was a Golden Gloves boxer. Pretty impressive accolades when you consider just how unassuming a man Eric Bischoff is currently. It was through his pursuit of martial arts that Eric met Sonny Onoo, and his association with Sonny would eventually put Eric on the path to wrestling, but more on that later. Eric Bischoff, pursuing his place in the world, became a salesman and then a model, and through his modeling, Bischoff met the love of his life, Laurie Bischoff, who was also a model. Eric and Laurie's marriage soon gave birth to a baby boy named Garrett, the future TNA wrestler. And Eric, being the responsible parent, scrambled to find ways to maintain and provide for his family. And so Eric teamed with Sonny Onoo, who had come up with the idea of Ninja Star Wars, a laser tag-like game aimed at a younger audience. The entrepreneurial Eric Bischoff pursued ways to get his products in the hands of customers, and Eric, who had previously had from his earlier years as an high school amateur wrestling competitor a connection with Minneapolis' own Verne Gagne of the wrestling promotion AWA. Eric proposed Verne 50% revenue share if Verne advertised the Ninja Star Wars toy in the AWA weekly televised broadcast, and this was Eric Bischoff's foot in the wrestling door. Eventually, Ninja Star Wars faded away as a product, but Eric remained in the AWA wrestling bubble, and as the AWA crumbled under the assault of Vince McMahon's nationwide expansion, AWA talent left, and again, opportunity was created. One day, someone was needed to perform announcing duties, and Eric Bischoff was given the opportunity to work as announcer for the televised product of AWA airing on ESPN. Eric did his best and learned to become a broadcaster. Enamored with the television production side of wrestling, Eric learned of all the different trades involved with creating a televised broadcast. And Eric, loyal to Verne Gagne, remained in the AWA for the worst years of the promotion. And after a failed audition for the WWE, where Eric Bischoff was asked to sell a broom to Vince McMahon, Eric had his cars repossessed, his heat cut off, and at home, the Bischoff family was hurting. In 1991, things got better. Eric got signed as a third-string announcer behind Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone to work for WCW, and Eric was paired with another entrepreneurial-minded individual, DDP, Diamond Dallas Page. Eric was signed to WCW by its president at the time, Jim Herd, the former pizza franchise boss who came up with the Ding Dong's tag team gimmick. Herd was one of a long list of corporate overlords appointed by the owner of Turner Broadcasting, Ted Turner, to try to make WCW profitable. Eric continued his work as the backup to the backup announcer in WCW second-tier brands of Saturday Night, and Bill Watts, the successful Mid-South wrestling promoter, became the WCW executive producer. But when Bill Watts proved to be behind the times and failed to navigate the now corporate atmosphere of WCW, leaving the executive vice president spot wide open, the wheels started to churn in Eric Bischoff's head, and around the same time, Jim Herd was replaced by Bill Shaw, and Shaw was a man with a larger vision, and Shaw saw things differently. Shaw wanted someone who was not so deeply ingrained into the wrestling zeitgeist, someone with fresh ideas and a new outlook for this new era of professional wrestling. Is it important to note that WCW was one of the many subdivisions of Turner Broadcasting, the huge media conglomerate that had in its portfolio CNN, TBS Superstation, TNT, Hanna-Barbera, Cartoon Network, Castle Rock Entertainment Productions, New Line Cinema, to name a few. And while this was a boon for WCW in its earlier years, and the owner Ted Turner was both a wrestling fan and trusted in the product, there was however some dissent among the other divisions, who scorned the wrestling product and wished to see it purged from their media conglomerate, and this would play a role later in the downfall of WCW. More on that later. Eric Bischoff gambled on himself, and Bill Shaw made Eric Bischoff the executive vice president of WCW. Eric assumed the reins of WCW in 1994, leaving a sour taste on the mouths of other executives within the company, because Eric, who was low on the totem pole, leapfrogged everyone, including both his colleagues Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. Schiavone took that in stride and accepted Eric's role as the boss, but Jim Ross, who wanted the job and was deeply loyal to Bill Watts, who had left, decided to give his notice and moved on to the greener pastures of the WWE, becoming the greatest announcer of all time in the process. If you like what you see, make Stone Cold Steve Austin smile by pressing that like button. Thanks. Eric went about planning the future of WCW. At the time, WCW was not a financially successful company, and WCW had on the people's minds a connotation of being inferior to industry giant WWE. For WCW to be successful, that perception had to change. Eric Bischoff worked hard to change the perception in the minds of the people about WCW. Eric stopped the hemorrhaging of money by stopping touring altogether, because they were spending more money touring than they were making, and Eric worked with Disney MGM to find a permanent home for WCW, a place to tape the multiple syndicated shows and have events with a fixed rent and the revolving door of theme park guests assured to be part of WCW tapings, guaranteeing a full attendance and mainstream credibility by associating with Disney. It was during this time that Eric Bischoff started to pursue former WWE champion Hulk Hogan. Hogan was semi-retired at this time, and while filming Thunder in Paradise, Hogan and Eric met and hit it off, becoming friends to this day. Hogan signed with WCW, immediately giving mainstream recognition to the brand. A huge parade was organized, bringing more eyeballs to WCW than ever before. Hogan, however, was not the ratings draw that Eric had hoped. Hogan was portraying his played-out red and yellow tights good guy, and with the addition of other former WWE superstars such as the Macho Man Randy Savage, the perception was that WCW was signing aging former WWE talent that had been portrayed as retired in Vince McMahon's company. Bischoff had, however, successfully reined in WCW's finances, but the company still wasn't competitive with the WWE, and this was Ted Turner's intent all along, for WCW to be a global wrestling brand. Eric Bischoff met with Ted Turner, and Bischoff, who was there to discuss other issues, was stumbled by the chairman Ted Turner with the $1 million question.
You know, I had a meeting with Ted to talk about international distribution.
Star TV and the additional $1 million or $2 million that it would bring in, and sat down in Ted's office, and
I got about 30 seconds into the meeting.
I got about 30 seconds into my pitch.
He stopped me dead in my tracks.
And Ted interrupted me, and
It's the first meeting I'd ever been in with Ted.
Ah, Eric.
I won't do a bad Ted Turner impersonation.
Eric,
Tell me,
what do we got to do to
what do we got to do to be competitive with WWE?
compete with WWE?
Actually, he said, what do we do to be competitive with Vince McMahon?
Basically what he said was, Eric, what do we need to do to be competitive with WWE?
I went, oh.
I wasn't prepared for that, and I stuttered
I used to box, right? I was a Golden Gloves boxer.
I wasn't prepared for that. Hadn't thought about that.
and said,
Cover.
I don't know, I'm thinking that. I have no idea.
And the only thing I could think of to answer that question,
I said the first thing that came to my mind.
the truth is, they're in prime time.
I said, well, Ted, he's prime time.
We have a Saturday night show.
We're Saturday, 6:05 Eastern, 3:05 Pacific.
Give me prime time.
I said, we need to be in prime time.
Not thinking for a second.
And he looked over at Scott.
So who was the TNT or the Turner Golden Boy at the time, the heir apparent to take over for Ted.
Oh, Scott, give Eric 2 hours every Monday night.
Ted looked right at me and said, 2 hours every Monday night on TNT.
Up against WWE on TNT. TNT was a flagship network.
No one ever believed Ted would put wrestling on TNT, especially in prime time.
And so Monday Night Nitro was born, competing directly with the WWE, who aired on the USA Network. Nitro aired their first show from the Mall of America, at the time the biggest mall in the United States, again accomplishing two things at once: a guaranteed crowd for a company with trouble filling seats in arenas, and spectacular visuals of a company doing an event in the heart of America. Eric Bischoff also inadvertently caused even more buzz for the WCW when he signed Lex Luger, who was a WWE signed wrestler up to that point. Eric Bischoff, who signed Luger as a favor to WCW's mainstay and homegrown superstar Sting, caused the wrestling world to go into a frenzy of publicity with the appearance of Luger, who was the all-American hero in the WWE up to that point. Nitro began to gain traction in the professional wrestling scene, and Eric wasn't done yet with the revolutionary changes. Eric surmised that if the WCW was to take the fight to the WWE, WCW would have to become the opposite of the WWE. Eric Bischoff went live with Nitro while the WWE was taped. Eric Bischoff made WCW storylines reality-based instead of the cartoon drivel that had gripped WWE at the time, and WCW would target the 18 to 34-year-old demographic, while WWE targeted kids and their parents. Eric introduced to the mainstream audience the Mexican and Japanese hybrid style of fast-paced wrestling. With all these changes, WCW slowly started to make a dent in the WWE's hold on the professional wrestling business. And off the success and buzz that Luger's arrival had generated, Eric saw the value in signing former WWE wrestlers, especially if those wrestlers arrived unannounced and in surprising fashion.
I'm the game, Triple H, and I would like to
personally ask you to press that like button. Thanks. The opportunity presented itself to sign Razor Ramon Scott Hall and Diesel Kevin Nash. Eric pounced on the opportunity and both men started to appear in WCW with the gimmick of being outsiders and invaders. Eric then went even further with the theme of warring factions. Eric borrowed from a storyline running in New Japan and saw an opportunity, and it was decided for Hall and Nash to align with another former WWE wrestler, and that wrestler was Hulk Hogan, who up until that point was a wrestler synonymous with the competition. The genius of this move was to make Hogan, the longtime babyface, turn heel and become the villain. And on the July 7th, 1996 Bash at the Beach pay-per-view, Hogan turned on his on-screen associate Randy Savage, and for the first time ever, Hogan would become a bona fide heel. The chain of events that followed changed the wrestling world forever. The three men assumed the mantle of the NWO, the New World Order, and this gimmick would dominate the wrestling business for the years that followed. Eric became obsessed with WCW being the sole professional wrestling promotion, and multiple wrestlers recall Eric proclaiming in several backstage meetings that Eric Bischoff wanted to bankrupt and drive out of business Vince McMahon along with the WWE. And therein lies the problem. Eric Bischoff was just an executive of a global media conglomerate. Eric Bischoff was in charge of a subdivision of a company with a dimension of epic proportions. Eric Bischoff was not the owner of WCW, and Eric Bischoff could only do what he was allowed. Vince McMahon, on the other hand, was the owner of the WWE and could do with his products what he saw fit, and Vince McMahon didn't have to answer to anyone. After the NWO angle gained traction, Eric managed to elevate WCW to the top of the ratings, and for 83 weeks WCW would dominate the airwaves, and for a time WCW reigned supreme with little challenge from the WWE.
It's not easy being king.
Eventually, the tides would turn, the Vince McMahon and Stone Cold rivalry would help turn the tides, and WWE would regain dominance in the Monday Night Wars. Vince McMahon had adapted and changed his product to a more contemporary product, with the help of former magazine writer Vince Russo, and at the same time, Eric was starting to lose control over WCW, and Ted Turner would force Eric Bischoff to produce a second show, Thunder. And this was the move that broke the camel's back. Producing Thunder put a heavy strain on the production side of WCW. WCW, who was already producing Nitro Saturday night, now had to produce a second live broadcast every week, and Eric Bischoff had to produce Thunder without any supplemental budget to do so. And so, stale storylines on screen led to the erosion of the ratings. And behind the screens, Eric's control of WCW continued to erode, and by 1998, Eric was confronted with having to deal with the corporate BS associated with a media empire the size of Turner Broadcast. And Turner, who had merged with Time Warner in 1996 into an even bigger media conglomerate, put WCW on the path to extinction. Eric Bischoff, who was accustomed to having the man at the top, Ted Turner, trusting his judgment, quickly found out that Ted Turner had lost power in his own company, and Eric, left to fend for himself in the corporate shark-infested waters of Time Warner, gradually started to lose the tools he needed to continue to compete with the WWE. At that time, Vince McMahon started to employ more risky and adult theme angles, garnering huge ratings, and Eric Bischoff was handcuffed by corporate policies and standards and practices. Compounded with the corporate structure of Time Warner and WCW being its black sheep, the other executives who had little understanding of wrestling even went as far as to request WCW scripts months in advance for a product that is mostly often improvised. By 1998, Eric Bischoff was burnt out from the constant fighting within the corporate atmosphere of Time Warner, and the geniuses at Time Warner decided to release Eric Bischoff to sign former WWE writer Vince Russo, with the idea that Russo was the driving force behind the WWE's rise to dominance. Side note, Vince Russo's contributions to the WWE product are many and valued. What Russo did in WCW without Vince McMahon's control is of questionable quality. Storylines like Judy Bagwell on a forklift and Viagra on a pole really speak for themselves. Vince Russo's time at the WCW helm would eventually cause even worse ratings, and the WCW brass would come calling back to the man that led them to the dance. The arrangement was made for Russo to work with Eric, and both men were supposed to work together to improve WCW's rating, and both men in the beginning of their relationship had good intentions to work in tandem for the greater good. By 1999, WCW was a failing company, and due to the way that the parent company was set up, WCW was only credited with the revenue from the live events and the ratings of their shows, leaving the revenue of the pay-per-view's huge money gains reflected on the balance of other division Turner Home Entertainment. And on paper, WCW was losing money, and WCW was a sinking ship. That ship would sink even lower after the relationship between Russo and Bischoff failed, and again Eric Bischoff was on the outs. WCW was on the path to extinction under the shadow of the Time Warner media conglomerate, and things would get even worse after plans were announced for Time Warner to merge with AOL into the AOL Time Warner media giant, leaving WCW's place in the corporate ladder even smaller and diminishing WCW in the overall scope AOL Time Warner company. Fast forward to the year 2000, WCW was a failed wrestling company hanging on by a thread stuck inside a media conglomerate where nobody wanted it to succeed. Eric Bischoff, the entrepreneurial person that he is, saw value in WCW, and Eric proposed to then WCW president
Brad Siegel
to buy the company altogether. Eric had on his corner Brian Badal of Fusient Media Ventures, a company that saw success with buying old libraries of sports programming, leading to the birth of ESPN Classics. In early 2001, Time Warner accepted a $67 million offer from Fusion to buy WCW. The wheels were in motion, and the idea was for WCW to disappear from the airwaves for a few months, stopping touring completely, only to come back under the form of a planned pay-per-view dubbed The Big Bang. WCW would have a permanent home in Las Vegas, and everything seemed on the right track for the rebirth of WCW. But then, AOL Time Warner decided that they didn't want wrestling on their airwaves, and without a viable channel to air, Time Warner, adamant on the price they wanted for WCW, forced Fusion to back out of the deal. And in the end, WCW, along with their vast library and intellectual properties, were sold to their competitors, the WWE, for a mere $4.2 million. Eric discovered the downfall of the WCW buyout deal in the worst way possible.
So I flew my wife and my kids and a couple of their friends, and we all went out to Hawaii, on the beaches of Waikiki. I knew that I was going to go back to working 18-hour days, 7 days a week again. My phone rang, and it was Brian Bedall, one of the partners in Fusion. And he said, "Eric, it's done." And he said, "Eric, it's over." It's done like it's over. We're not going forward. Because it's not going to happen. The deal's off the table. All of a sudden, everything I thought that was going to go on for the next couple of years just evaporated into thin air. I was stunned.
After the downfall of WCW, Eric would receive a call to be part of the invasion angle from Jim Ross, then the head of talent relations. Eric got the sense that the time wasn't right to join WWE. Eric then went on to work with Jason Hervey developing reality-based TV shows. And then in 2002, Eric Bischoff received a call from Vince McMahon.
The first time I talked to Vince McMahon on the phone.
"Hey, Vince, how are you?"
Hey, pal. He was elegant. He was respectful.
It was such a great conversation. It was easy.
And within 90 seconds, I was telling myself, this is going to be a blast.
I knew that I was going to do something with Vince. I didn't know what.
He's a pretty persuasive guy, as we all know.
And one of the things I do remember him saying, if things would have turned out differently and you would have ended up coming out on top of this thing, I would like to think that you've given me an opportunity to get back in the business. And, Vince was very gracious.
Eric, touched by the kind gesture of Vince McMahon, decided to sign as a talent for the WWE. Hell froze over as former foes become allies as they embrace live in the Raw broadcast. And Eric Bischoff, now without the burden of running a wrestling company, thrived as a talent for the years that follow, both as the Raw general manager and as Eric Bischoff, the Karate Man.
Let me tell you about a man who rides side by side with justice. Eric Bischoff, Karate Man. He's an artist with his fist, and the canvas is your face.
Thank you for watching this trip down memory lane. Leave your comments, suggestions, ideas or constructive criticism in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to press that like button and also subscribe for more future content just like this. Or better, this has been fun. Thank you for watching.